was something that this guy has started. He was the first defense secretary under Eisenhower. But he was wrongly attributed to in terms of the concept of the permanent war economy. It was not him who originated it. It was another Charles Wilson, who was the president of General Electric. And this is the particular line that he actually said during a gathering of the Army Ordnance Association in 1944. What is more natural and logical than that we should henceforth mount our national policy upon the solid fact of an industrial capacity for war and a research capacity for war that is already in being, it seems to me anything less is foolhardy. So he hammered and consolidated the theory of permanent war economy, and that has pretty much defined what came out of the military-industrial complex, or what came out of what we call the permanent war economy, that Seymour Millman addressed consistently from the beginning until his death in 2004. And these are just some of these industries that probably are the current expressions of the military-industrial complex. The unity of government and the private sector, these are the current stars from the private sector. They also happen to be the largest contractor for Pentagon. Of course, this figure came back from 2006. I couldn't find any, new figure, but we're just, emphasizing the fact that these entities are so major component of what we call the military-industrial complex. And actually, Bob Smith will focus the conversation we have here. As I'm presenting a more general overview, he will give a more focused presentation in terms of one specific entity under the military-industrial complex that is here in our area. Again, just this information, I don't have to prolong. Now, when we speak of military-industrial complex, one of the definitions that I showed earlier is that it shows to be an informal alliance of the industries, of individuals, of people in government. This was the previous administration, some of the key actors, and actually if we take into, looking at the details of the background of these people, you will be also not surprised to find that exactly as I placed those faces in the screen, these are the very interests also behind the spaces. Northrop Grumman was Wolfowitz, Gilead, which produced Tamiflu, which was supposed to be, a cure in terms of the avian flu, which became a national security issue when it first came out sometime in 2004, in which one of the guys who was, the head of Gilead, and that was Rumsfeld. The Bush family has been associated with the Carlyle Group, not only in investment, it's also a defense entity. Halliburton, of course, we know who the person is associated with that, and Chevron, Condoleezza Rice came from that background. And so there were lots of scandals that came out, during their time, but they just point out to how these people have a specific interest. And therefore, it only goes to show of what the government is, especially the executive department, as expressed in those names and faces at the time, and how they link into these various industrial entities called that we now, subsume under the more broad term military-industrial complex. I just want to project this picture. This is Franklin Feeney. He was an analyst in Pentagon's Office of Program Analysis. He was a former military man and then became assistant analyst for the Defense Department. This was during Reagan's time, around 1981, when he actually exposed the fact that there were entities, there were military weapons manufacturers that were very much connected to the Congress and influenced the whole process of, of how the defense spending was appropriated. So he exposed this particular thing. He was reprimanded by his senior officials, but what happened, because of the nature of the expose that he did, it became, you know, a cover for the Time magazine at that time. And one of the articles that he wrote, just to illustrate the connections between Congress and the executive department and the military industrial or the industries, and how they constitute the military-industrial complex, he described what he called the defense power games. And and there were two particular games that he identified. Number one was front-loading, which is the practice, as probably Bob can at some point elucidate, of planting seed money to new programs while downplaying their future obligations. So much sales talk is happening under this concept of front-loading. Something is described to be the most effective way to deal with Al-Qaeda and so on and so forth, even before the very thing is manufactured, even before it's proven. And actually, when it is put into practice, they fail. But there is so much talk, and the kind of defense power game is called front-loading. The other is political engineering, and this is something that is even closer at home. That is when the money is spread through jobs and so on and so forth. That's why, for instance, I don't know, Lockheed Martin is one entity that has like a presence in more than 40 states throughout the U.S., that whenever there is a challenge in terms of what Martin Lockheed is selling before the people through quote-unquote the contract that they are, establishing with the Defense Department, then there is like, that thing, they sort of alert people saying that your jobs will be threatened, you should therefore, stop whatever thing that is being planned, in terms of closing down a particular program, closing down, or, a plant and so on and so forth. So, Franklin Speedy was the one who described these particular power games inside, the defense. And he actually elaborated on this. He's still up to now very active. In fact, he has an email site, and he has been one of the most sharp critics in terms of the war in Iraq and so on and so forth. But I also want to point out another person, and his name is Chalmers Johnson. And I hope that the three books that I have here, which is a trilogy, it started with Blowback, and then the Soros Empire, and the Nemesis, which is like the last days of the American Republic. He basically, described the power of the military-industrial complex, of how it was the power behind the so-called American Empire, which also threatens the very republic from which the empire started. And a lot of the description that Chalmers Johnson is doing in terms of exposing the connection between the military and the government, he uses the power games that Speedy has described earlier, the front-loading and political engineering.